ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੈਰੀਟੇਜ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ is being shared for everyone to understand the deep underlying concepts of how the formation of global map in the South Asia is something which needs to be reviewed again, and it is a subject to repeal because this act was passed in 1947 and it is called Indian Independence Act. And I will try to convince you that there is a deep importance to understand the depth of this subject because it has never been reviewed. Actually, the concept of a country created by an act of another parliament is something which is a flawed narrative. I think so. And that's why the Sikh Heritage Party is deeply concerned that this subject has not been studied by international community a lot, and this has led to a deep fissure in South Asia, leading to rise of two nuclear nations, and this leading to the fact that it has put a great question mark on the authenticity of this act by the international laws. And to introduce myself, that why I am interested in bringing forth this in front of international community to pay attention on this. The biggest reason is this that this Independence Act, which was passed by a majority of the parliamentarians of British Parliament, has led to a deep unrest in the Indian subcontinent, and it has most deeply impacted the Sikh society, by which Sikh kingdom, by which Sikh country, by which Sikh governance has been completely decimated, and it has also led to an unending dispute in this part of South Asia, leading to destruction of a composite society of Punjab, where I'm from. So I will slowly build up a case for United Nations to bring it under its per the conventions that stateless people can bring forth the attention to their claim of a nation which they deserve by the jurisdiction of the International Justice Court and per the international laws and per by the Charter of United Nations. So as I dig deep into the subject, I would like to share the consequences of this great diplomatic bungling on the part of the United Kingdom as it left its colonial empire and divided the nation of South Asia into different countries, and which has led to a deep unrest. And the biggest sufferer in this whole unrest is the Sikh community. And that's why I laid the foundation of Sikh Heritage Party, and I will try to bring forth the benefit of having a Sikh nation in that part of the world, and how the international community can understand the history of the Sikh rule in this part of the area of the planet, and how the destruction of the Sikh empire has led to insecurity in whole of the South Asia, and in fact pan-global rise of hostilities amongst the mankind, different groups. So before I explain to you the Sikh political theory, I will try to reason out the background of why I am introducing you to this subject. The first and the foremost concept is this of Indian Independence Act, which was passed in 1947 as a root cause of total collapse of the global security system, global unrest, which we see today in most part of the Asia continent, and also the unrest which is in pervasive in Europe as well as slowly coming to the shores of the Atlantic and coming to United States itself. So what is this Indian Independence Act of 1947? So the Indian Independence Act is a law which was passed by British Parliament, and it was passed to lay down the foundation of a new world order after the big war ended. And though it ended the war, but at the same time it started a new challenge which we are facing in today's world. So Indian Independence Act is a big law, but in short, it was an act which was passed by British Parliament whereby it divided its colonial Raj of present South Asia with the British administration ruled of 2 centuries came to an end as the war ended and the British economy was crumbling and British were trying to wrap up their Raj and go back to their home country to save their own nation. So as we can see, it was an act to make provision for setting up in India of two independent dominions, two dominions, which it means by two different countries. And as you can see, though it seems like that it has been enacted by the British Parliament, which in fact it was, but as you can see, this was in the name of the monarchical system of the Britain, enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by the advice and consent of the Lords, spiritual and temporal. Spiritual and temporal is a very important word to understand this concept. So the British Parliament was custodian of spiritual and temporal aspects of governance, which the kings, the crown, enjoyed and maintained its whole entity. At the same time, the British Parliament, the House of Commons, Parliament assembled, and the authority of the same as follows. This was passed in 18th July 1947. So main aspects of it is that from the 15th of August 1947, there will be two independent dominions which will be set up in the British India. And those two dominions were named India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan, which are the two nations today, both nuclear, dangerously nuclear, diverse, At the same time, what's called right wing ones in both of these two countries, and they were divided on the basis of arbitrary contentions and conventions, and they were named as new dominions. And to understand the subtle aspect of this, that due to creation of these nations, India and Pakistan, they were, in fact, this act is one of the world history's most arbitrary act, which was passed when the world had United Nations. And without taking United Nations into confidence, this act was passed and two nations were created, and the British Parliament played a big role in creation of these two nations. Though nations, global maps, they keep on changing every century, but why Sikh Heritage Party is interested to work in this field is because the Sikh Heritage Party is a party which was created out of Sikh heritage. And Sikh heritage at one time was much ahead in the governance models before the British came to shores of India after being defeated in United King States. United Kingdom had to spread, find the markets to get a cheap raw material, and after procuring cheap raw materials, it needed markets to sell its products so that the industrial revolution, the pace of industrial revolution in the Europe can match up to sell the products to the markets. And this part of the planet was one of the biggest market at that time. And British colonialism was at its peak. But after the two wars, the British colonialism and colonial, uh, the model of governance was collapsing all over the planet. And during that collapse, the world's biggest diplomatic bungling happened. And this is one of the facts which is responsible for what we are facing today, which is that the whole planet is suffering because what was created by this model, by this sect, has resulted in one of the biggest issues which the world community is facing today, which is insecurity. And issues like terrorism and domination have taken a newer form whereby the democracy itself is facing a new substitute, seeking a new substitute for the governance and demands of the new nation theories is there for the human civilization to understand that how to govern the developing nations where the population is so huge and administration so pure that poverty at the grassroots level and the poor administration has led to dangers which we civic societies of the mankind face today. So I will elaborate on this Indian Independence Act and how and what is the need of this Indian Independence Act to be repealed and to be reviewed, which I would say in the United Nations. So that is the real goal of me sharing with you guys, everyone in the audience, and everyone who's watching this video, to understand that this Independence Act, which should have passed in the United Nations, and the international community should have been taken into confidence, it was not taken, and it led to the complete collapse of the world security system that today, especially at the start of 21st century, mankind has seen horrible results which have the roots in the passage of this Act of 1947 in the British Parliament. And as a Sikh, I would emphasize upon that this act should be reviewed in the United Nations, and at the same time it needs to be revisited, and there has to be some sort of restructuring and exploring the depth of what could have been alternative, which was not explored because of the hurriedness shown by British to go back to England and save their economic collapse which the country was facing at that time after the war ended. And I will continue. Thank you very much.